Hi there. Today we're going to explore the plot of the 2022 film Titanic 666. The ship, incredibly similar to the legendary Titanic, collides with an iceberg during its voyage. Two lovers are separated, and a mysterious ghost pulls the girl underwater. 100 years have passed since the catastrophe, and a new liner, Titanic III, is launched. It is set to follow the exact same route as its legendary predecessor. Among the passengers are popular blogger Mia Stone and her husband Jackson. They take photos with fans, stream live, and board the ship. The captain of the new ship is Celeste Rhodes, and the head of security is a former U.S. military officer, Brian Andrews. All systems have been checked, the engines start successfully, and the tourists set off on their journey. Secretly, a young red-haired girl sneaks aboard. She walks through the cargo holds, carefully examining everything around her. Mia and Jackson record a new video, telling their audience that the liner is an exact replica of the original Titanic. The very next day, all passengers will arrive at the location where the disaster happened, and over 1,500 people lost their lives. A moment of silence is planned there. Meanwhile, the stowaway girl finds a museum-style cabin filled with exhibits. She tries to take a violin, the same one that musicians played during the 1912 tragedy. It had been lying at the bottom of the ocean for 100 years. She is stopped by the museum director, Professor Cochrane. The girl remembers that her great-grandmother had the exact same hairpin as one of the items on display. She says that taking objects from shipwreck sites is wrong. It can bring about a terrible curse. Mia and Jackson continue blogging, but also get into an argument with Cochrane. While exploring the lower decks of the ship, they run into Brian Andrews, who helps them find their way back to their cabin. Meanwhile, Cochrane tells one of the passengers that he once visited the real Titanic wreck and brought back many artifacts. For example, a wedding ring with the inscription, "Edward and Sarah." It might have belonged to Captain Edward Smith himself. The red-haired girl finds a portrait of Captain Smith and decides to summon spirits from the ocean depths. That evening, a grand party is held aboard the ship. Mia and Jackson descend to the lower decks to show their followers something extraordinary. There, they witness the mysterious girl performing a dark ritual. They record it on camera. The girl intentionally cuts her hand and chants an incantation. She appeals to an unknown dark force that, as she says, must correct the mistakes of the past. After this, electrical issues begin on the ship and mobile communication disappears. Mia and Jackson run into one of their fans, and shortly after, Professor Cochrane. He starts flirting with Mia, which irritates Jackson. The situation nearly turns into a confrontation. Finally, Titanic III reaches the location where its predecessor once collided with an iceberg. A moment of silence is announced. The red-haired girl feels a strong wind. Before her appears the ghost of Captain Smith. She reaches out to him and calls him her great-grandfather. Mia and Jackson are walking across the deck with a camera when they suddenly hear music. Before them appears the ghost of a violinist. They decide to dance, but suddenly the lights go out. The ghost begins playing a terrifying ultrasonic tone. The sound is so loud that people nearly lose their minds. Jackson seems to be pulled away by some invisible force, and he disappears overboard. The electricity comes back. Everything stops. Mia, in a panic, searches for her husband, and Cochrane joins her. The girl grabs her phone and goes live. She tells her followers what's happening, but the ghost of the violinist appears again and begins to play. The ship continues its journey and enters a zone of thick fog. No one is able to contact Captain Rhodes. Professor Cochrane talks with a wealthy elderly tourist. They discuss the fate of the Titanic. Cochrane sells her a valuable piece of jewelry from his collection. Two workers spot Mia on the deck. She's motionless and shows no signs of life. One of the crew members, named Parker, finds Captain Rhodes at a party. He reports that something strange is happening aboard Titanic III. After that, Andrews appears and leads the captain to the upper deck. There lies an unconscious Mia. It looks like she was attacked. In the lower section of the ship, one of the workers hears strange noises. These are ghosts, and there are many of them. The man fails to escape from them. Captain Rhodes watches footage from Mia's phone. It shows Jackson disappearing somewhere, and some unknown entity attacking Mia. The last person who saw Mia alive was Professor Cochrane. The captain interrogates him in the presence of Andrews. Cochrane insists that he is innocent, although everyone knows he had conflicts with the couple. As soon as the captain leaves the room, we learn that Cochrane and Andrews are partners. Andrews brings wealthy tourists to Cochrane, who sells them artifacts from the Titanic. Captain Rhodes notices that the ship is starting to move again, even though all engines are off. Nearby, several enormous icebergs appear. On the deck, the ghost of a woman materializes. She looks intently at the necklace of one of the tourists, then lets out a strange, eerie sound. The necklace begins to tighten around the woman's neck, and she collapses unconscious right on the deck. Captain Rhodes realizes that the vessel must be stopped immediately to avoid a new catastrophe. She and Andrews try to do this manually, but they don't have enough strength. On the lower decks, several vital mechanisms fail. Soon, a powerful explosion occurs. The crew begins to panic. Part of the engines in the engine room completely fail, making the vessel even harder to control. Soon, a massive iceberg appears on the ship's course. If the direction isn't changed, a collision will be inevitable. Due to communication failures, the crew cannot contact other nearby vessels for help. With great effort, Captain Rhodes manages to reach the Coast Guard and transmit the coordinates of Titanic III. She urgently requests a tugboat to be sent in order to avoid evacuation. But unfortunately, the nearest ship will only be able to arrive in 2 hours. Meanwhile, Cochrane is isolated in a special cabin that functions as a temporary prison cell. However, the cabin begins to flood gradually, and the lights go out. Cochrane switches on a flashlight and hears the same eerie ultrasonic sound. A ghost appears in the cabin, and it clearly does not have good intentions. One of the tourists tells Captain Rhodes that she saw a ghost. Naturally, no one believes her at first. Andrews finds Cochrane. He's lying on the floor, gripped by terror. The professor keeps repeating that he saw a ghost. The captain realizes this is no longer a coincidence. Andrews and Cochrane spot the same red-haired stowaway girl on the stairs. She admits her name is Idina, and she is the great-granddaughter of Titanic Captain Edward Smith. With hysterical laughter, Idina accuses Cochrane of everything. He stole jewelry from the wreck of the Titanic, and now the spirits are seeking revenge for his greed. She declares that Titanic III is cursed, and no one will escape punishment. Another ghost appears in Cochrane's path and chooses a new victim. The professor manages to escape. They try to lock Idina in the prison cabin, but another ghost is already inside. Andrews pulls out a pistol, but it's useless against an incorporeal entity. The ghost instantly connects with Idina, and Andrews watches in horror as something supernatural transfers its power and even identity to the girl. Soon, Idina uses her supernatural abilities to attack Andrews. Once again, Titanic III experiences power outages. Captain Rhodes sees a ghost, but the other crew members don't. Cochrane hides in his cabin. He wants to get rid of all the jewelry and artifacts related to the Titanic, but even in the bathroom, he is met by a ghost. The spirits continue to appear, and each time, there are fewer and fewer passengers left on board. Idina breaks into the control room. She attacks Parker and then Captain Rhodes. Meanwhile, a gigantic iceberg is rapidly approaching the ship. A collision becomes inevitable. Idina, with a mad smile, voluntarily leaves this world. Titanic III crashes into the giant iceberg. Panic breaks out on board. Passengers are urgently called to gather on the upper deck. The massive liner gradually begins to sink. Cochrane finds Captain Rhodes and says there is only one way to fix the situation. All the artifacts from the original Titanic must be returned to the bottom of the ocean, but it seems it's already too late. Passengers begin to evacuate into lifeboats. People feel as if they are reliving the tragedy of the real Titanic all over again. Andrews is attacked by yet another ghost. He tries to use his pistol but ultimately turns it on himself. Captain Rhodes takes charge of coordinating the rescue operation and asks Cochrane to help. Passengers run around the ship in panic. From time to time they encounter ghosts, and their numbers are growing. Moreover, those who were once alive are now turning into spirits themselves. Among them is Andrews. The ship's supports collapse. The liner tilts more and more to one side. Fortunately, most of the passengers manage to get into lifeboats, although some of them capsize. Titanic III rapidly sinks. Cochrane lies in a lifeboat, trembling with terror. He manages to save Captain Rhodes. The captain begins to laugh uncontrollably, because in essence, he is the main reason behind everything that has happened, and yet somehow he managed to survive. Cochrane believes that this is unjust, and consciously chooses to leave this world. Unfortunately, even after that, he does not find peace. becomes a ghost. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, give it a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.